Okay. Good evening, everyone, or it might be another time of the day if you're somewhere else. I'm Ian Craig. I'm here in Johannesburg, locked in Johannesburg, and we're doing a transatlantic webinar tonight with Kylene in Cleveland, Ohio. So thank you, Kylene, for joining us. And we've got a very big participation all around the world, it seems, with people on the call tonight. So I haven't actually ever met Kylene, but we've interacted in this way a few times. Met you a few years ago.
Yeah.
And you're in the functional space, and it's, I think, the one and only time I've heard dietitian and functional in the same sentence. So that was really cool to meet you. But since I've met a few more functional dietitians, so it's becoming
it's growing.
It's growing, definitely. So Kylene's a registered dietitian in Ohio. She's an ex-athlete and works very much in the sporting space, but spent a few years in the Cleveland clinic in Ohio, which was, I think, set up by Mark Hyman, wasn't it?
Yes.
Certainly, he was a figurehead there. So kind of like my background, a bit of, health related practice and then sport specific practice. So you've got a really nice, cross-disciplinary way of working. And I just put it out to Kylene, would you like to present and what would you like to present on? And she put forward working on the elimination diet, which we haven't actually done yet. So I'm looking forward to tonight. And with that, I will pass over to you.
All right, good to go. Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you for everyone tuning in this evening and this afternoon here. If you're in Ohio or the U.S., it means a lot to me that you're spending time here during this crazy quarantine. But I'm very excited to be here. This is a topic I love so much because I feel that for the most part, this is not something we learn in school. It's not a topic where you can just whip open the textbook and maybe look at a few journals, research articles, and get going. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of studying data and symptoms and kind of putting it all together. But once you learn these patterns and once you do this a bit, I truly believe that you could take your athletes to the next level. I think this is one of the most underrated tools for nutrition professionals. So before I begin, I'd just like to mention that I have no financial disclosures to report. So if you hear me mentioning a certain supplement or a certain testing company, it's just because that's what I use. It's not because I'm receiving compensation. So for today's agenda, briefly we'll go over the basics of functional medicine and nutrition. We'll discuss the difference between a food allergy, food intolerance, and food sensitivity. I'll briefly go over alternative options to conventional food choices and protein powders. We will learn how to guide an athlete through a standard elimination protocol, start to finish, the exact way that I do it every week. And we'll also go over appropriate food reintroduction and the post-elimination protocol, because that part is equally as important. So I will not spend much time on this, but those of you tuning in probably don't know me. So track and field was my sport. I was always an athlete growing up. My parents' joke was that I came out of my mom's womb using starting blocks. My dad built a high jump pit out of a yardstick and a bed mattress, right after I learned to walk. So fast forward a little bit. I have an undergraduate degree in nutrition and dietetics. I am a registered dietitian, master's degree in exercise physiology. And I think what makes me so unique is that I have board certifications in sports nutrition, but as well as integrative and functional nutrition. So usually people don't combine those two specialties, but I have found that it's really given my athletes an edge having this knowledge base. So I actually started my career full-blown conventional nutrition. I was the food pyramid dietitian, counting calories. I worked in the hospital inpatient, outpatient, recreation centers, you name it. And then Dr. Mark Hyman, a name you might know, came to the Cleveland Clinic, and he founded the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. And I was working in outpatient conventional nutrition at that time. And I noticed a lot of the professional athletes, at least in the States, were kind of gravitating towards functional nutrition. And I didn't know much about it, but I knew that there had to be something special, because why would they be studying this? And lo and behold, I was accepted for the position there as one of the dietitians. I learned directly under Mark Hyman. And that's kind of where all this elimination diet stuff began. I mean, we had massive volumes of patients. I mean, there were times when our wait list was over 3,000 patients from all over the world. So when you're seeing those kind of volumes over and over and over again, and so many different chronic illnesses and different cultures and dietary habits, you tend to become an expert whether you want to be or not. So I kind of took that information and I brought it to the sports performance side. So I'm now the dietitian for the Cleveland Cavaliers. For those who don't care about basketball, that is the NBA. And I also run a private practice, which is really nice because it keeps me extremely relevant. I mean, there are days when in the morning I'll be working with some of the greatest athletes in the country, and then at night I may be seeing, one of the most chronically ill patients in the city. But you can use the exact same strategies and elimination diets no matter what your patient population is, athletes, no athletes, it doesn't matter. You can use everything we're going to be talking about in this webinar today. So I know that most of you are probably well aware what functional medicine is, and functional nutrition for that matter. I promise I will not spend a lot of time on this, but for those who find that this is brand new, functional medicine is a personalized, systems-oriented model that empowers patients and practitioners. So to make a long story short, in the world of functional medicine, we are addressing the root cause of the disease. So if you have joint pain or migraines or reflux or hives, we want to know why that is happening instead of just addressing the symptoms and kind of masking it with a medication. So, and then functional nutrition is the core of this. You really can't heal a human being or improve athletic performance if you don't fine-tune the nutrition. I don't care how much God-given talent someone has, you have to work on the nutrition. So as a dietitian in functional nutrition, I'm looking at the root cause and I'm trying to figure out what the system's imbalance is. I want to correct that to help the athlete get to the next level. It is more holistic and it's much more multidimensional, and it is evidence-based, but it's also very much practice-based because no two humans are identical. Genetics are different, environment is different, diet is different, training regimen is different. So you can't just say, well, this study says this and this study doesn't. You have to take all of it and compile it together to really help the patient or the athlete. And we perform a comprehensive nutrition assessment. It's very much a personalized treatment plan. No two athletes leave my office with the exact same recommendations. And it's very much an integrated approach, which we're looking at nutrition, but also supplementation. It shouldn't be one or the other. Usually the two kind of coexist. And if you do a great enough job with the nutrition, usually supplementation kind of fades in the distance as we go along, as we progress. So what's the difference between conventional approach and integrative and functional? Now, granted, integrative and functional are almost always lumped together. They're kind of like best friends or close cousins. They're very similar and they're becoming one, but traditionally, let's put it this way. So an athlete comes into your office and they have reflux. The conventional approach would be, all right, well, here's some Pepcid or here's some Zantac, take some reflux meds and maybe avoid the spicy foods, maybe cut out the peppermint or the coffee, maybe the chocolate. The integrative approach is, okay, that's a good foundation, but maybe we should add a little bit of meditation or maybe some acupuncture to kind of calm the GI system, calm the immune system, and work as a piece, as a counterpart to the conventional approach. But then functional says, but why does this athlete have reflux? What is going on? Is it solely diet related? Is it stress? Is it the environment? Is it all of the above? Now let's get to the root and reverse these symptoms instead of masking it. And this you may already know, but again, for those who are brand new, conventional sports nutrition, the way I was traditionally trained, it's a bit more generalized versus very individualized, unique recommendations. It's kind of more eat your fruits and veggies versus, all right, let's implement some testing to correct deficiencies. There's a huge focus on calorie and carbohydrate counting versus, all right, let me look at you and your symptoms in your food journal and let me tweak diet accordingly. And we'll be talking a lot about that today. The food pyramid is very old school. Now it's my plate, but it's still the same concept versus let's focus more on making the gut run optimally. And let's focus more on your immune health. And hey, you're an athlete, you're burning a ton of calories, you're training 3 hours a day. Who cares if you eat all the sugar and garbage? Who cares if you're drinking soda and eating fast food all day? It's fine. You're training hard, you'll burn it off. And now we know, of course, that couldn't be further from the truth, especially if your athlete has symptoms of fatigue, poor recovery, joint pain, the list goes on. And sometimes in the conventional world, it's a little bit of a one size fits all, when really we want to individualize it. We want to focus on whole food, real food, and just getting that macronutrient balance with those foods. So I would love to know if you're seeing this in your practice. I imagine you are, because this is something I'm seeing on a daily basis, especially, I've been practicing for about 10 years. It was nothing like this when I first started my career. I feel that I'm seeing food sensitivities left and right, more and more and more. Even IgE mediated true food allergies developing later in life. I'm seeing athletes diagnosed with celiac disease or Hashimoto's or even type 1 diabetes at age 30, 40, and 50 now, which at one point we thought that was unheard of. We thought it was just related to childhood. Do you ever have any of those athletes that are allergic to the world? I mean, they're few and far between, but they exist. The athletes that get hives and histamine reactions, and they can't tolerate literally 30 different foods, and it only worsens as life goes on. or maybe worsens when training is very intense. And I don't really work with peds, but every now and then I will have a few youth athletes in my office, and most of them now have a food intolerance of some sort that was not there at birth. So it's really important that we're tuning into this, because at the end of the day, you could be working with the most elite of the elite athletes. But if you're finding that, you find the subtle symptoms are there. Maybe their skin doesn't look that great. Maybe they're bloated after meals. Maybe they don't go to the bathroom every day. Maybe they have headaches once a week. That is not normal. And that means you as a practitioner should be diving into that and thinking, I could easily take this athlete, a few notches up. I could give them that edge. I could take them to the next level, because they shouldn't be experiencing any of this. Even if their performance looks good in the pool, or on the track or on the court, there's still something that can be done. And that's why I created this webinar. So why is this happening? People always say, well, you work with athletes. They're the healthiest people out there. I can't believe you're even wasting time on this subject. But the thing is, our environment's more polluted than ever before, at least here in the US, right? Agriculture in the US has changed dramatically. I know it depends where you are in the world, but athletes typically rely heavily on NSAIDs, birth control, acid blockers, antibiotics, and that can rip apart the human immune system, mainly gut integrity. Our athletes travel, they go on different continents, different time zones, or they're college athletes eating cafeteria grease. So you have to be careful with that. It all compounds. And what does this do? It rips apart the gut microbiome. And over time, if no one is addressing this, symptoms result. And then, of course, it kind of starts with poor digestion. Not always, but that's usually step one early on. And all of a sudden, they're not digesting their food. They're not absorbing their food. And it's also possible that they're not digesting, absorbing their food, even if they have absolutely zero gut issues. No bloating, no constipation, no diarrhea, no pain. It doesn't mean that their gut integrity isn't compromised. The fact that someone might have eczema, acne, or psoriasis is a sign that the gut integrity is compromised. So then, even if the athlete's eating the most beautifully balanced diet on the planet, they're not utilizing those nutrients. And then all of a sudden, they're kind of creeping towards that autoimmune cycle. I mean, of course, your genetics play a role, but it's more common than I think most of us realize. And just because an athlete has perfect body composition and is playing well doesn't mean they're healthy. So again, this is probably routine information for most of you, but for those who are new, leaky gut is what I'm referring to, right? The tight junctions in the gut should be well-formed, tight, sound, beautifully tied together. And then as you go through life, the medications, the stress, the junk food, the overtraining starts making that gut lining permeable. And all of a sudden, food and pathogens and many other things start seeping through.
Netflix emails me.
Toxins.
Yeah, it's something you might like. I'm like, oh boy.
All right. I think someone's microphone. When intestinal permeability occurs, okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. If you can't, let me know. Okay, so leaky gut, step one. All right, then all of a sudden, if it's not addressed, poor malabsorption, and all of a sudden the athlete starts getting the responses, the skin issues, the fatigue, the poor recovery, whatever it might be, sinus issues, very common. And then all of a sudden, if that's not addressed, over time, it usually results in, oh man, I can't tolerate eggs anymore, or gluten, or dairy, or peanuts, or you name it, broccoli, whatever it may be. And then way down the line, again, if that's not addressed, autoimmune disease may occur, or cancer, or, depending on your genetics. But the goal is to treat the root today, because not only will it help athletic performance, but you're helping them down the road. And I firmly believe if you are not optimizing human health, you'll never fully optimize athletic performance. So what the heck is an elimination diet? Right? Ian and I were talking, there's probably 115 different varieties of this, right? Technically veganism is an elimination diet, keto, paleo, they're all different forms of elimination diets. Removing the top 8 allergens, that's an elimination diet. But long story short, in general, we're removing trigger foods for a minimum of 3 weeks, usually 6 to 12 weeks. You need a 3-week minimum to even see any kind of progress, but 6 weeks is kind of that sweet spot. That is where I found the immune system kind of calms down, it relaxes, we're ready to go. 12 weeks though, if someone has been suffering for years, usually you want to go a little closer to 10 to 12 weeks. But again, you meet the athlete where they are, see if they're even open to this in the first place, and just take it from there. So really, the goal is to individualize this. But I will tell you personally, it took me years to figure out, to track the patterns and to see what worked and what didn't, and what symptoms tend to correlate with what foods. So the removal is really based on the athlete's food triggers. Or if they come to you with food sensitivity results, that's fine. I never ever start there. We always go with the food journal. I think that's very much the most accurate way to start. Plus, it saves money for a lot of the athletes. If you have no idea, if you have no clue where to start, the athlete's food journal is all over the place and you have no idea what's going on, just start with the most common allergens. And really, the goal is to have the body calm down, decrease that immune system burden. And then the athlete all of a sudden typically starts to feel a lot better. Even sleep improves, recovery improves, everything in between. Most of the time, these athletes don't even realize anything was wrong until you walk them through this and reintroduce, and they thought, oh my gosh, I had no idea that it wasn't normal to feel this way. I had no idea this food was causing this particular issue. So how does this translate to better performance? Well, the most obvious is that it increases inflammation, right? A cut or a bruise or a wound is acute inflammation, but chronic inflammation is the fatigue and the skin issues and the soreness that we were talking about, right? And an athlete should not be sore for 4 days after a tough workout. I mean, that means there's something we're not doing right. Of course, we want to improve intestinal permeability, which then improves the digestion and the absorption. Like I said, they don't have to have any gut issues to be having intestinal permeability. And it's just really, really important. So the best part here, better cortisol response. So that's really interesting. I think most practitioners don't realize that if an athlete is repeatedly eating a food they're sensitive to and they don't know they're sensitive to it, that can raise a cortisol response the exact same way that extreme stress might from, a breakup or a divorce or losing a job. The body doesn't know the difference. So it's very possible that their poor sleep patterns and their extreme stress and their gut permeability has to do with the fact that they're eating something over and over and over again that isn't working well for them. And of course, it saves a ton of money on medications and really further testing and further procedures. There's no guarantees, but think of this process as the windshield wiper. We're kind of like clearing out the cobwebs to figure out what's still going on. And by the way, if you orchestrate an elimination diet correctly and the athlete follows it well and you know that they're being truthful with you and they still don't feel better, that's almost always how you know that the issue is related to something in the environment, some kind of environmental trigger, right? I see a lot of heavy metals. I see a lot of mold. Being in Ohio, from time to time, we'll see Lyme disease. I've had athletes go on vacation and contract parasites from scuba diving. I mean, I've seen the craziest cases. But yes, diet, if it doesn't make an extreme difference, that's how you know you have to dive really, really deep. But why not start here? Because it's easy to do. So, and the thing is, this isn't a rare occurrence. This isn't like, oh, once every 6 months I see a miracle come into my office. Within the last year, I've had an 11-year-old tennis player with terrible rosacea. I once had a hockey star with awful, awful migraines daily, terrible GI upset, had been there since birth. I had a 78-year-old woman who was a swimmer, leisurely swimmer, but still, chronic knee pain, had gone to so many doctors, had been on so many prescriptions. I think she had 2 or 3 different surgeries. And then recently, a weekend warrior, 45 years old, plantar fasciitis. And I put them all on a very similar elimination diet, and every single one of them had complete symptom relief for the first time in their life. Now, again, I'm not saying this happens every time, but it's so cool to know that this is even possible. So how do you know if you or your athlete should attempt an elimination diet? These are probably the most common symptoms. Mood, skin irritations, everything from asthma to severe acne to depression, poor recovery, any kind of gut issues, or recurrent illness, recurrent injury. It's really, really critical. Something's going on there. Unexplained fatigue is probably the most common. That tends to do very well when following this approach. But what I want you to teach your athletes is if they ever have a symptom that has failed to respond to conventional medical therapy, so that would be like the medications, the procedures, the treatments, or it only kind of half responds, as my patients say, it kind of worked, that is how you know it's time for an elimination diet. Even if it's just for 3 weeks, it's a good time to start. And so it's so important to know that food is not usually the cause of the ailment, but it can act as gasoline on the flames of the inflammation, or it can just put out the inflammation altogether. So yes, I know you might be eating a certain food and the eczema occurs after that, or the migraine occurs within an hour. Yes, food is the trigger, but food is usually not the root. There's something poking the human immune system, something really aggravating the human body that's saying, listen, I can't really take this anymore, so these symptoms are going to exacerbate in the form of sinus issues, whatever it may be. So it's kind of like the immune system is like a bucket. And once that bucket overflows, so let's say we're dumping stress in the bucket and junk food in the bucket and medications. And maybe we live in I recently had a soccer player that lived in a moldy dorm, and that was the root of her issue. So once the body can no longer take the bucket being full, it overflows, and that's when we start to see symptoms. So honestly, when the athlete has symptoms, it means they've been dealing with this for quite a while. The root occurred a while ago. It's just that the immune system can no longer take it anymore. So briefly, I would love to address this because most practitioners actually don't realize there's a difference. Most people just refer to it as food allergy, but it's totally different than a sensitivity and an intolerance. And then of course, there's a standard processed diet of garbage food. So a food allergy is an actual IgE-mediated immune response to food. The symptoms are typically pretty immediate, and it's usually pretty severe, whether it's a rash, hives, shortness of breath, tongue swelling or itching, coughing, or abdominal pain. Those are probably the most common. You can really have an allergy to many things, but peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, soy, milk, fish, and shellfish are probably the most common. I'm actually seeing more corn. It's probably bigger in the US, but it's sort of a newer thing. But really, many foods can cause that reaction. But this is a pretty serious immune response. But a sensitivity, it's also immune related, but typically delayed. But this occurs from an imbalance in the GI system. So that is why you'll have athletes say, I don't understand. I've been eating these foods my entire life. And all of a sudden, I'm 22 years old. I can't tolerate half of these foods anymore. I swear I had no problem, the last 15 years of my life. And it's true. It's because something threw off the microbial balance, whether it was antibiotics is really common, whether it's birth control or NSAIDs or, whatever it may be, that concoction can throw off the balance. And all of a sudden, the gut isn't doing such a great job of ingesting these foods. And the reactions can be very much delayed. It could be a few hours, but it could also be 3 days later, which is why it's so hard to detect, because the athlete could eat something on a Monday and not feel terrible until Wednesday. The most common symptoms are migraines, fatigue, sinus drainage or congestion, constipation, excessive sweating, acne, muscle or joint pain. Again, not the only issues, but probably the most common. Again, trigger foods are very similar to that of food allergy. And last but not least, an intolerance is a totally separate category. So it's not an immune system reaction. And this usually occurs when there's a lack of digestive enzyme or nutrient responsible for breaking down a component of the food. So it's not really the food itself, it's more of the component. So like, for example, lactose or MSG or certain preservatives, food dyes, that's usually where the intolerance kind of comes from. It doesn't mean you couldn't have an allergy, but usually it's intolerance. So for what it's worth, it's so important to know these things. And also too, I didn't waste time on it, but a processed diet. I mean, there are certain situations where an athlete just feels terrible and is recovering poorly because they're eating processed food. So once you figure that out, they don't have to go through the whole, 3 to 12 week elimination protocol. All right. So now I'm going to walk you through this the exact same way that I do every week. So step 1, if you're ready to get into this, you basically just copy. I created a medical symptom questionnaire, which I'll show you on the next page, but it's basically ranking the athlete's symptoms. 0 meaning you never have this issue, 4 meaning this is terrible, I have it every day, I can barely function. Then we kind of start with the baseline score. After step 1, during step 1, I'm also having the athlete keep a food and symptom journal. There's no point if they're just going to write the food down. I mean, that's okay, but I need to know what's going on. In a dream world, I mean, a lot of these athletes, you can really get a 2 or 3 day food journal, but if you can get 2 weeks, that is the best for tracking patterns. Because then you can kind of figure out, okay, is this person just eating junk food, or is it actually a sensitivity, allergy, or intolerance? And what can I do to treat it? And ask them to track all symptoms, no matter how insignificant, because it's probably going to be significant to you. And that's the only way you'll learn to track these patterns. And you need to see this over and over and over again to put the pieces together. And I want to know what a good day looks like. If an athlete felt awesome one day, best workout they've had in weeks, recovery was awesome, sleep was awesome, I want to know what they ate that day. I want to know what they drank that day. It's really, really important to record the good and the bad. So journaling is the big part of step 1. You don't have to have this symptom questionnaire, but this is the one I designed. I think it's kind of helpful. It's also nice because it's a free tool. It can be done, finished in 5 to 10 minutes, and you can implement it every 3 weeks or every 3 months or whatever your protocol is to track the progress. And sometimes the athlete doesn't even realize how far they've come until they look at this and think like, holy cow, my score was 100 and I'm now at a 10. I mean, that's phenomenal. So, all right. So, okay. And I want to address this because I work with high school athletes, I work with college athletes, and of course, professional athletes, and even executives, right, who have no time to sit there and talk for an hour. So if that's anything like you, request a food journal in advance. Just ask for 2 days. If they could just give you 2 days of eating, it's so much better than absolutely nothing. 2 to 3 days, just take it. Have them fill out some kind of symptom questionnaire. I mean, you can even make your own, you could borrow mine, whatever it is, but just have them gauge, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's bothering you and how bad is it? You could make your own tool within minutes. Why are you coming to see me? Always ask that, because maybe the doctor referred, but a lot of times the reason or what they hope to get out of their session with you is totally different from what their physician wanted. Ask what their health concerns are. And then I think most importantly, do you have any symptoms that are really bugging you? And then kind of go from there. And don't forget to ask what their stool looks like. I know no one likes to talk about this, but my joke is your poop is your window to your soul. Like, I need to know if you're digesting your food. I need to know if it's oily or greasy, or if there's pieces of, nuts and kale in there. We need to know what's going on, because again, they may have no symptoms, but there could be something very seriously wrong going on. Step 2, the timing and accuracy is so important, and consistency is so important. Like I said, 3 weeks is way better than nothing, but 6 weeks is kind of that magical sweet spot. It's not too long, it's not too short, it's doable. And again, if you don't know where to start, just copy this. Remove the top allergenic foods and go from there. And please tell them to read food labels. Most athletes don't understand, that there's soy embedded into their salad dressing, or maybe there's egg in their protein bar and they had no idea. They have to read labels. In a dream world, they'd be making their own food, but it's just not realistic for a lot of our athletes. So this is kind of like the next level elimination. If you want to add this on, this is optional. If someone is very chronically ill and they suffered for a long time, I would do everything. I would take out the beef, the caffeine, the sugar, and the alcohol. And not that there's anything wrong with beef. Someone asked me last night this question. It's just that if their gastrointestinal system, if their digestion is compromised, sometimes beef is a bit harder to digest. But once you correct the imbalance and you get the gut working again, they can usually tolerate so many more things that they could not previously. So again, you can kind of pick and choose from there. And for those who feel this is really overwhelming, just collect the food journal, look for patterns, and maybe remove a couple of the foods that you think might be suspicious. So step 3, probably the most important step. Please provide information in advance. Please lay out meals. I'm not saying you have to calorie count everything, but let them know what the best recovery shakes are that are available to them. Snack bars, snacks, meals, lay it out, because what's common sense to you is usually not common sense to these athletes. It's not common knowledge. And you'll have these slides. So if I'm going a little bit quickly, it's just because I know you'll have a copy, but it's just a few examples. I always joke, I say, you don't have to eat, lint, ice cubes, and kale. There's plenty of foods that you can choose from. You just have to know what's out there, no basic preparation, cook in advance. And, I always say, message me anytime with questions, send me pictures of what you're eating. I have a platform where the athletes can just message me all the time. So it's pretty helpful. So this would be a sample meal plan. When the athlete panics, you say, no, really, it's not that bad. This is a pretty typical day when you're removing some of the bigger allergens. You can still eat a lot of your favorite foods. Maybe we're just replacing certain foods, and we're still eating good quality protein, fat, carbohydrate. It just might be maybe a little bit less processed than what you're used to. Again, if we prepare in advance, you will be just fine. Please predict the panic. At the start of my career, when I wasn't very good at this, I would just say, here's a sheet of paper. I'll see you later. Don't eat these foods. Come back. And I would see grown men cry. Several times I've seen, very tough grown men cry. So please make sure that you find out what they love, find out what they're accustomed to eating, and then swap that. Don't just hand over a meal plan, and don't even just hand over these examples. Just say, what do you like? What condiments do you like? What sauces do you use? Now let me replace this for you before you go to the grocery store for 3 hours and cry your eyes out, because it doesn't have to be that way. And if you help them in advance, success is so important. And I guess this is critical because I was always taught in school, don't make any drastic changes when the athlete is in season. It could be very dangerous. You could, a lot of bad things could happen with skill and technique and energy. And that's how I practiced at the start of my career. But now I see, if you have the tools in advance, if the athlete is understanding and they're willing and able to comply, and they're open to maybe removing a few foods and trying a few new foods, sometimes it can actually improve performance in the season because they feel so much better. So for what it's worth, I thought that was worth mentioning. So a lot of these things, soy sauce is popular. I replace it with coconut aminos, which I think tastes even better. They're a little bit sweeter. Ian said flax egg is not a thing where some of you guys are. We have flax eggs. We have chia eggs in the US. If anyone wants a recipe, just let me know. Or you could buy it from your grocery store. There's so many different pastas now, and they're very good tasting. Make sure you cook al dente, otherwise they get a little weird and mushy. Almond flour crackers are delicious. Coconut, oat, almond yogurt. There's so many options now. Coconut kefir is very popular. We have cassava baked tortilla chips and wraps, which are so good, which, a lot of times if you just show the athlete what's available, they end up liking the new foods better because it tastes good and they feel better. So it's a win for everybody. So step 4, though, you have to make sure you're supporting training demands if you're going to be doing this at the peak of the season, or really any time where training is intense. I would strongly encourage a 1 to 2 week meal prep. If you can grocery shop with them, that would be awesome. But if not, sometimes when I'm working with a huge team or a huge group of people, I will actually videotape myself and just send the grocery video to them, because I'm not going to take 12 people to a grocery store. Make cheat sheets, hand them out to your clients. But the calorie intake has to meet the demands of the sport. If you have a picky athlete who is not going to eat half the foods you recommend, don't do it. I wouldn't even implement the elimination protocol. Maybe you could remove a food or two, but I wouldn't even attempt it if they're not open to making changes, because performance will suffer, and who knows what could be long term. If they're in season, focus on weight stability, of course. Really, really emphasize strong recovery nutrition. For example, if that athlete's used to whey protein and you pull that away, you have to rebuild a shake for them. Like, I have a whole list of recovery shake templates of different flavor combinations and different powders, and I hand that over. I think it makes a huge difference. And don't hesitate to encourage basic supplementation. We're not going to blow out the budget and give them 20 different supplements. I think there's a very bad reputation sometimes with functional dietitians because they think that we're very supplement heavy. And yes, maybe, depending on what's going on. But even if the athlete just took additional magnesium and a multivitamin and some kind of high quality protein powder, that usually makes a huge difference, and it's all you need. And so for those who think, oh my gosh, what do you do without whey protein? What do you do without soy protein? Okay, I know this sounds weird, but there's powdered beef protein powder, and it's actually really good. Maybe not so much the unflavored. I kind of dry heaved with that one, but the chocolate is very good. Vanilla is pretty good. Pea protein, most people are familiar with pea. Rice protein, there's hemp. I would just add a scoop of L-leucine because it's so low, obviously important for recovery, but there are other options. And I would strongly suggest you try these yourself first. Always try them yourself before you say, take this, because ooh, this one needs a little extra banana and cinnamon, or this is fine. You'll like this one best. It gives you credibility, and it's helpful to walk in their shoes before you have them go through something that's such a big deal. So for the reintroduction, there's no point in an elimination protocol if you're not going to reintroduce the food properly. Why go through the effort if you're not going to guide them? So then I bring back the symptom questionnaire at this time. We compare scores. You hope that it's going to be significantly lower, and it should be if they followed it correctly. Even if just a little bit lower, this approach always puts a dent in the symptoms, if not removing them completely. Please reintroduce one new food at a time. I know it's annoying. I know it takes patience, but this is critical. And usually you reintroduce based on prior symptoms, based on how they're feeling. If maybe the athlete is a diabetic, I'm probably not going to have them load up on, a certain fruit they removed, or maybe I do something more like beans where there's a little bit of fiber, a little bit of protein, if that's something they removed. If I know that the athlete was really, really sensitive to dairy, I might wait with that. I might bring that more towards the end and start with more gentle reintroduction. Sometimes we'll do the opposite. If the athlete says, listen, I'm never giving up these foods again. I just want to know if this food is a problem or not. I don't want to pay for testing. Just tell me what to do. Then in that case, the foods that you suspect are the most problematic, start there. Start there when the immune system is really calm, feeling good, and try some of those foods that tend to be more offensive, and then see what happens. But here's the key. The food has to stand alone in its most natural form to start. So if the athlete's like, please, sweet Jesus, bring back the ice cream. I need the ice cream. Okay, hold your horses. Start with cow's milk, just a plain glass of cow's milk where that's the only component. Or if they're just dying to bring back wheat, okay, don't bring back the bread that has 10 different ingredients. Bring back, something like pasta where the only ingredient is, semolina durum wheat, and that's it. Just a few examples. And then when you reintroduce, it's one new food every 4 days, because remember, the reaction can be delayed. You may eat something on Tuesday and not feel poorly until Thursday or Friday. So one new food every 4 days. And ideally, if you can get them to do this, they would start with that new food. So one serving of the new food on an empty stomach on day 1, just see how it goes. If they're okay, great. Have it again, that same serving, again, that afternoon. Then just wait. Day 2, off. Wait for residual effects, because they could eat something at dinner and feel awesome and then wake up the next day and they can barely move their hands. Their joint pain is so terrible. So just remember that it can very much be delayed. So then if they're okay, day 3 repeats just like day 1. That food early in the morning, then again that afternoon, and just wait and see what happens. And then day 4 is off again. So if they're okay by the end of day 4, great. that food can be back in the routine, I still wouldn't eat it all day, every day. I mean, I wouldn't eat any food all day, every day. We want to, build the diversity in the gut bugs, and we want their diet to be varied in terms of nutrients, but just remind them, even if it goes over well, don't eat it every day, because you may end up with a problem down the line if you don't have one now. And again, keep track of the symptoms when they're reintroducing, because they're not going to remember what went well or what didn't go well, or they may not even realize what's going poorly and what's not. So they can just bring you the journal. And again, at first, it's really weird. It's kind of like, oh, I don't know how to track this. I don't know how to put these symptoms together. This is just very foreign. But once you do it over and over and over again, I was telling Ian, I've been through this over 3,000 times. No exaggeration, with chronically ill and with elite athletes. But because our volumes were so high, I was kind of, it was baptism by fire. I got to track the patterns, and that will be you too. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the more it just becomes second nature. So make sure they track it. You want to see their notes, and remember that no two athletes are alike. And that's why the reintroduction process and even the elimination process shouldn't be the exact same for every athlete in your office. I told you to encourage the food rotation. And of course, the famous question, oh man, do I have to remove this food for life? It's just hard. It's sometimes yes, it's sometimes no. I mean, you'll have an idea when they reintroduce, but sometimes it's just a matter of, let's get to the root, let's heal the intestines, and let's bring it back in 3 months. And sometimes it's totally fine. Or in other situations, they've been suffering so long and they didn't know it, that it triggered an autoimmune condition in the body. And then all of a sudden, there's a chance they may not be able to eat certain foods again. So it really depends. There's no hard and fast answer, but you have to kind of study the athlete and just see how it goes. And if it does go over poorly, the food does go over very poorly. Like if they're really, really sick from the first reintroduction, just stop right then. Stop right then, wait a few days, bring back a new food. But if it's kind of like, I'm achy, my head hurts, feel a little stuffy, but I'm not sure, have them keep going. And then if they still feel that way on day 1 and day 3, even if it's mild, I wouldn't bring it back. I would wait 2 to 3 months, keep working on your protocol, your testing, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever you normally do, and then we'd bring it back again and we'd track it and we go through it again. So what can you expect? If it's implemented correctly, usually energy skyrockets. I mean, most people don't realize how great they can feel. Body composition is much more easily achieved, especially for the athlete that struggles. It can improve mood, brain fog, faster recovery after workouts, overall inflammation. I mean, I have seen the most unbelievable success stories from this, decreased pain and swelling, and the list goes on. But in general, these are the biggest things I normally see. So in summary, you may not even realize that some of your athletes are dealing with allergy sensitivities or intolerance until you dig really deep and go through an elimination, at least 3 weeks. Don't forget to reintroduce 1 new food every 4 days, and please journal and track the symptoms. So again, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to hear your questions. I actually have a blog dedicated to this exact topic, more functional approach, elimination diets, a lot of free information that you or your athletes could access. I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, so please take a look. I'd love to connect on Instagram. I'd love to meet all of you, maybe come visit you. So thank you so much, Ian. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kylene. When I saw Kylene's slides, I just said, you are going to get this in within an hour, aren't you? But that was
got it. Okay.
That was like 40 minutes, so I'm super impressed.
I tried. Okay.
You go faster in the States, I'm sure, than
we do,
in Europe.
Which is not a good thing. Yeah, it's not good.
Right, guys, we're open to questions, and we've already got 2. So let me read the first one out. Okay, so this is Allison. What is the platform you use with your clients for them to share their meals and get in contact with you during this process?
Sure, great question. It's called Healthy, Healthie. So not a Y, it's an IE, and it's a nice platform geared towards dietitians and the athlete or anyone. Your patients could send pictures of their food. It goes right into your feed, kind of like an Instagram feed. So that's what I use.
Next one from Sebastian. How do you organize elimination diets within the crazy NBA travel schedule? As the team nutritionist, do you have influence on the meals on away games?
I do. And now in that situation, I usually don't implement it in the middle of the season. Like we eat so much, our schedule's so crazy. It is almost humanly impossible to do correctly because if you can't follow it 100% to a T, you're wasting the athlete's time. So any of that I do in the off season when I can just talk to their chefs directly, there's full control. Because you're right, on the road, we're just, we're dining out, we have different chefs, different hotels, and there's no possible way to control like the soy and the wheat and the dairy completely. We do pretty much, but yeah, so that's a smart question.
Okay, from Lauren. How do you get athletes to take responsibility for removing foods and tracking symptoms? I find this goes well with older athletes, but college age don't often follow.
Oh yeah, for sure. So there's two parts to that. I always gauge the interest before we even begin, because if I can tell that they're not going to start it, or of course they're going to start it, but if they're not going to comply, I just get that sense that they're just like, nah, this is too much. I would never even start it in the first place. But I really, really make a point to say, you shouldn't be feeling this way. You shouldn't look this way. You shouldn't have a face full of acne. You shouldn't be farting in the weight room for 3 hours straight. Like, this isn't normal. I know you've been doing this your whole life, but this is not normal. And if we can improve this, I truly believe we can improve your recovery and your performance. And when you angle it that way, and you tell them it's not forever, that we're using this as medical nutrition therapy. We're not here to remove all the foods for fun. This is nutrition therapy. And it can improve your performance. And you give them the list of the recovery shakes, the recipes, and you actually lay out for them this for this at this time, this at that time, let's try this. Then usually compliance is outstanding versus like, remove this, Google this website, good luck,
Good answer. Okay. Any more questions, guys? Just fire them through. While we wait for more, I'm gonna ask you one or two.
Okay.
Okay, so you talked about like wheat and dairy as common food sensitivities, and thanks for differentiating between allergy sensitivity and intolerance, because that drives me nuts as well when people interchange them.
Yes.
Let's take the example of dairy. So dairy is a kind of food group, and obviously with an elimination, you take out all dairy. And then you identify, okay, you take that cup of cow's milk when they're reintroducing, and you identify, okay, that's an issue. It's getting the sinuses or a bit of gastrointestinal cramping or whatever happens. What's your take on different forms of dairy? So, if it's not so hectic, getting more into the fermented forms, the kefirs, that sort of thing.
That's a great question, because it does differ. And some people, they cannot tolerate any of it no matter what, and some do okay. So if I sense it's going to be a really big problem in the reintroduction, so I remove all of it. So to answer your question, during the actual 3 to 12 weeks, I don't even do the kefir. I don't even do the basics. But then for the reintroduction, if I sense there's going to be a real problem, I start with goat or sheep, whether it's milk, yogurt, whatever we can find in their store, depending where they live. And then if that's okay, then I go into more of the fermented cow products like kefir. And then I work my way up that way if I think it's going to be a problem. If not, if the athlete didn't think it was a problem before and I didn't think it was a problem, we start with good quality organic grass-fed dairy in its natural form. But yes, I actually do a little chain of events there with the goat, then the sheep, then the fermented, if I think it's going to be a problem. Good job, Ian.
Yeah, brilliant.
Great question.
Yeah, you follow my patterns. I tend to, if there is a problematic thing, either an elimination challenge test or a food sensitivity testing, I'll keep it out for a bit. But if it's mild, we'll test the kefir later on. But you've got more availability than we have in South Africa.
Okay.
I can't get like a raw goat's kefir or something like that, or a buffalo milk, so there's a little bit more limitation. But I do find that tolerance to something like a properly fermented kefir is so much better than even a yogurt.
Totally.
And then obviously, because you're breaking down the casein and the lactose.
Right. And just for the record, Ian, a lot of athletes don't realize that, like, it's not normal to not poop every day or have one small bowel movement daily. Many times when I remove the dairy is when they're like, oh my gosh, it's free flowing 2 times a day. This is great. So, they never thought it was a problem, but you don't know. Anyway, okay, keep going.
That's a good point.
Right?
Guys, but don't assume people know that they should be pooing every day, because often, once a week, you what? Okay, another question from Lauren. What are your thoughts on doing a histamine food elimination diet with proposed histamine sensitive individuals? That's a good question, going off to another type of sensitivity.
I think it's awesome. of course, keep the food journal first. The histamine is nice because it's usually really clear. You can usually see, oh my gosh, it's fermented foods, it's avocado, it's egg, it's cashews, whatever. The histamine is nice because that's one of the most clear when you're looking at food journals. So if you see that in the journal first, absolutely, you would do that for like 6 weeks. Yep, that's a great idea.
Okay. All right, Iris. When you introduce a specific nutritional trigger that you eliminate, you put it back on diet alone. You mean just eating that product that specific day, or not mixed with something else in the same meal?
Okay, that's such a good question. I should have explained that better. Thank you. So let's say it's dairy. You wake up first thing in the morning, have a glass of cow's milk by itself. Wait a little bit if you can. I mean, I know everyone's schedule is crazy, but wait 30 to 60 minutes if you can. Then just go about your normal breakfast. Then go through the day again. When there's a gap between lunch and dinner and you have a break, when your normal snack would be, have another glass of milk by itself on an empty stomach, if you can. I know that's not always possible. People will say, well, I gave up, I don't know, I gave up gluten. Can I have it with my regular pasta sauce and all the stuff all over it? I wouldn't at first because you don't know how it's going to interact with the other ingredients in that meal. So hopefully that makes sense. So no, you're eating normally, but you're just kind of sandwiching in the new trigger food by itself.
Yeah, I agree. Keep it as isolated as possible. I'm going to throw in a comment. You were talking about picky athletes, and if you're sensing that they're not really going to engage, you'll kind of avoid doing the elimination because you want to take that seriously. With a picky athlete like that, I'll just try and identify low-lying fruit. So. Exactly. Like it's the wheat and the dairy. I see a bit of maize. Soya is not such a big problem here as it will be for you. So let's say it's bread and they're eating too much bread. I'll try and educate them on bread quality and say, right, there's a baker up the road there that does a traditional sourdough bread and it's still wheat.
Yes.
But hey, it's a stone ground flour and it's not got all the preservatives and conditioners and all the things that might nab the stomach. And sometimes, as you say, they actually like that better than what they left behind.
Yeah, beautiful example. You're exactly right.
Okay, Alison, do you ever recommend A2 milk? Good question.
I do, but you know what? Rarely do I see it make that big of a difference. You know, I know they explain to us different cow, different protein, and it makes great sense from a research standpoint, but what actually clinical practice, it doesn't often make a difference.
Okay. I don't see A2 milk here, so it's not something I've actually ever identified. Although I find that changing somebody from just a standard commercial dairy milk through the supermarkets to, we've got a couple of dairy farms near Johannesburg that, I've got pictures of the cows eating long green grass and they're treated, in an old fashioned way, and just shifting from commercial to small scale, I find can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Okay, Tracy, would you mind sharing a few brand name protein powders your athletes, patients most enjoyed?
Yes. That's okay, Ian, right? I can name brands, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. You've already said, commercial interest.
Okay. So, and of course, some of these are NSF for sports, some are not. It just depends who you're working with. But the beef protein, by far, Designs for Health, I think is the best. Pea protein, I usually use the Garden of Life. NSF for sport, very safe option. Momentous is also good and pea-based. Nutribiotic for rice, and hemp, Nutiva. And I can send you pictures, or if anyone wants to message me here, by the way, with any questions or examples or pictures or whatever, use my blog or Instagram, just because I receive so many emails each day, I struggle to keep up. So if anyone has questions or they want pictures, I'll just send it to you on those platforms.
Cool. Question from me. Do you ever do IgG testing or different type of testing? Obviously, if they're willing to spend some money.
Sure. Yes. I mean, if the athlete's really struggling and you just can't figure it out, absolutely. I use food sensitivity testing, and no, it's not the gold standard, and no, it's not the end all be all, but you can really use it as a tool. If someone's suffering, I use it to alleviate symptoms. I don't use IgG because it will if the gut is leaky, that test will light up like a Christmas tree and everything will be disastrous. But I use MRT, Oxford Biomedical. It's Leap MRT in the States. I think overseas a few different countries can get it, but it's much more comprehensive, and it looks at like the whole panel of food sensitivities, not just IgG, and that's what I find works best. It tells you which foods are safe for the athlete, which foods are more offensive, and then I make a plan based off of that, if need be.
Okay. What other technologies are they using if it's IgG plus others? Do you know?
Right. You know what? I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest, but at one point I spent hours and hours and hours researching this. I wrote an entire article on all the technologies and what they use. If you go to my blog, forwardfuel.com, you type in food sensitivity testing. 2 years ago, I went through and looked at all the technology, wrote about it, but honestly, my brain is fried from being in quarantine with a toddler right now. Terrible.
Yeah. I think you made a really important point around that, and it's not the be all and end all of a specific test. And there's a lot of medical criticism around an IgG test.
Oh, yeah.
I, for one, avoided it for years because of that. But then, I came to South Africa and, hey, I didn't really have too many options here, but there was a local IgG test. So I started using that. And knowing that it has limitations, I've actually been able to use it quite well because I'm respectful of the limitations. You just have to
know how to interpret.
You just have to educate your clients that, hey, this isn't black and white here. This is guidance. And as you said, if there's gut permeability, you suddenly get a massive number in the red.
Yes.
And you work on the permeability, and then that list gets smaller, and milk gets to a lower number.
Exactly.
And all the common culprits come down. So in that sense, it's still useful. And you can identify just how high the number is for certain things, and the likelihood that that's a problem, listening to the case history as well. Because you're listening to your clients and what they're responding to, and asking them to reflect on their food and stuff. So yeah, that's all important.
You're right.
Okay, Amanda said, would you use IgG, IgE, and complement? Do you know what complement is?
Yes, that's more in relation to the LEAP MRT. Yes, I would. That's more like the delayed type 3, type 4 hypersensitivities. Are you asking if I would do all of them, or you're saying which one?
Amanda, do you want to clarify that? She just said, would you use IgG, IgE, and complement? She said all of them, yes.
Okay. So, you could. If the possibilities were endless and they had access to everything, and their wallet was wide open, yeah, sure, you could. You did knock out a bunch of birds with one stone. But usually the IgE I will do if I suspect a true allergy. Usually it's immediate, it's intense, it's more of the shortness of breath, anaphylactic, tongue swelling, hives. Then I'll just send them to the allergist. IgG typically, no, I would not do, but more of the complement, yes, like the mast cell spectrometry, yes, I would. When I sense the weird sensitivities, but I can't figure out what's going on, that's usually what I use every time.
Just a comment on IgE. You'll get some clients that will come in and you start talking about food sensitivities, and they interrelate sensitivities and allergies as the same thing. And then they say, oh yeah, I saw the doctor last year and he did a food allergy test with me.
Yes. And
nothing came up. So yeah, I'm fine on that. So always ask to see the testing, and it will generally be an IgE, because I've never ever seen a clear IgG.
Great point.
Okay, Hala. I'm a runner with a long history of IBS. I discovered the low FODMAP diet a couple of years ago. IBS got a bit better, but still there. Do you think IBS is reversible with the elimination diet process? Okay, there you go.
I love that.
History for you.
I love that question. Obviously, there's a huge picture to that, and I have a million more questions for you. But oh my, of all things, like of the thousands and thousands of times I've done this, the two things that most commonly reverse, let's say three things: 1, fatigue; 2, IBS; 3, joint pain. Those are probably the 3 most common things I see often completely reversed with a process like this. So worth a try if you've never done it. And if it doesn't reverse it, that means someone has not gotten to the root of your health issues. So.
Well said. I'll back that up by using a quote that used to be we used to have a South African Association of Nutritional Therapists here, and they had the quote on the homepage. the body has an innate ability to heal. So to me, IBS is a description and not a diagnosis. It's just you've got an irritated bowel, and then it's a case of figuring out what is irritating it, which could be food, could be emotions, could be toxicity, could be a lot of different things. So it's teasing through that. Do you want to comment, Kylene, on the low FODMAP diet or any other gut-specific or GAPS diet or something, and your take on them?
Sure. I mean, obviously it depends what the person's coming in with, what the issue is, how long they've had it, what they've tried. But I see a ton of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, a ton, especially more with my more intense athletes, my serious endurance athletes, those that tend to have more at risk for overtraining or very just long 2, 3, 4 hour training sessions. It typically exacerbates the issue. I mean, low FODMAP is, in terms of research, you'll see the most evidence there. So I do use, if SIBO is diagnosed, I absolutely use a low FODMAP approach in combination with other therapies, whether it's herbal or whether we're doing antibiotics. GAPS diet is very good. I don't use it often because I'm working mainly with athletes and active individuals, and it's so restrictive. Does it work? Yes, but I don't typically dabble in that. I find of all options, what we talked about today was removing the top allergens, the most frequently consumed foods. I find that across the board, it works better than almost anything else, depending on what's going on. But low FODMAP is good if you have SIBO.
Yeah, I think low FODMAP is worth trying, and GAPS is worth trying. There are different approaches. But you just have to be careful because like I see some quite difficult cases, and I see a lot of very headstrong people who will do whatever. They'll find a diet and then follow it to the nth degree.
Yes.
But they're restricting their choices more and more and more. And that's a problem when it's a kind of personality that needs to open up. So
exactly.
Definitely need careful management around these, quote, diets, because we need to personalize it to their situation.
Well, that's why it's so important for you as the practitioner to implement and teach this correctly before you start. Let them know it's medical nutrition therapy, not an issue for life, because many disordered eating issues come out of the elimination diet if you don't implement this correctly. It's so important.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Iris, do you think that water fasting, for example, could speed up the process of deletion of food allergies, stroke tolerances, stroke sensitivities? Then once the gut is pretty clean, introduce food the same as you said. What do you think about that approach?
I would not. I mean, they'll feel better for a while just drinking water, of course, but just in terms of nutrition, right? Because obviously we want to support the liver and everything else in the body with detoxification, whatever is going on that needs to go on. Bone broth. I mean, I might come close to something like an elemental diet where we're focused more on bone broth and really soft foods. I might put collagen in their applesauce. I mean, something like that. But when someone's struggling so deeply that you need a water fast, that means we need to look into things like heavy metals, infections, mold, serious toxins, lead in the paint. I mean, I don't know. I mean, those are just examples, but usually when someone goes to that degree where they don't feel good unless they're only drinking water, and yes, it allows the gut to rest, but we can allow the gut to rest in other ways. We can do more intermittent fasting and different, more bone broth. So no, I would not do the water fast.
Good answer. I always point out that the liver actually needs amino acids.
Yes.
So even if it's a juice fast, it gradually runs out of glutathione.
Exactly.
So it's harming yourself.
I love you, Ian. Always speaking my language.
Yeah. We can have a good chat. Kylene was meant to be in Scotland next month, but that's been curtailed. So hopefully when you do make it to Scotland, I'll be there this time.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just going to make a quick announcement and then ask one more question because we're coming up to an hour. I just wanted to say that thanks to the online space, the Center for Integrative Sports Nutrition course is still running. Just we won't be running live Module 1 and Module 2. So it's online, and then Module 3 will be still hopefully live in London in September, if they let us out by then. Okay, so back to final question. Esther, if I pronounced your name right. Hi, Kylene. I will be a dietitian in this year, and I would like to start a school or a course about sports nutrition. Can you recommend something online? Oh, you can come and do our course.
Great. Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I'm assuming you're tuning in because this is what you're interested in. I mean, Ian's right. It's not just a selfless plug. I mean, that is absolutely the online course I would take if this is more of the avenue that you're looking for.
Okay, Sebastian just got in. Do you work with intermittent fasting or the fasting mimicking diet with any of your athletes during competition or season?
Never during competition or season. I mean, I'll do more of a 12, maximum 14-hour fast, because if you go longer than that, they're not able to consume enough nutrients to support the training demands. I mean, it's not possible. Then they eat nothing and they binge later in the night. Honestly, 12 hours is what the average athlete should be doing. Do half of our athletes do this? No, because they're up studying late or they're traveling from country to country, you know, if they're a pro athlete. But I never do anything like that in season unless it's maybe 12, maximum 14 hours, maybe just a few days a week, just to let the gut rest and the mitochondria repair. That's a good question.
Yeah, is a good question. Sebastian was on our course in 2018, so he was our prize student. So he jumps into webinars occasionally and asks some good questions.
Great.
And he's lecturing for us this year as well. So I want to say thank you. We've been sort of connecting here and there for a few years now, and it's great to have you on. It's the first time I've seen you present, and I thought you did great.
Thank you.
For everyone on the line, we will send out Kylene's slides tomorrow by email. You can either reply to the email if you get any questions, and I can forward them to Kylene, or you can jump on our Facebook page or Twitter. You know, all our information is on our website. The intsportsnutrition.com is our website. Okay, guys. So thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you.